Happy Halloween, everybody, or happy day before Halloween if you're watching this the day that I upload it. To celebrate Halloween, I figured I would do something special since it is my favorite holiday and time of the year. And I thought that the best way to do this was to follow a lot of horror YouTuber trends and make an Iceberg video. I made an entire iceberg about the scariest things in the Call of Duty Zombie series and shoved them into an iceberg, and we're gonna go over them right now. Oh, but before we get into the preamble, check the graph. Pretty much none of you are subscribed, so please consider clicking the subscribe button if you enjoy. Anyways, if you don't know how an iceberg works, quickly I'll go through it, but essentially the top layer is going to be where all of the most well-known, less spooky stuff will be located, whereas the lower we get into the iceberg, the lesser known and much more scarier stuff is located. It's hard to quantify these characteristics since they are so subjective, but know that the deeper you go into the iceberg, they will either be very unknown and kind of spooky, very known and very spooky, or just some sort of healthy balance between the two. And I also want to give the disclaimer that my definition of spooky encompasses everything from horrifying to grotesque to just plain scary. So a scary jump scare may get low in the iceberg, but so might something from the lore of the map because the lore is plain horrifying the longer that you think about it. Basically, don't think of these like a video game. Imagine if you experience these things in real life. That gives you a better idea of how I'm ranking the spook factor. I hope I got most scary things in zombies, but I doubt I got everything, so comment below if I missed any. If there's enough that I missed, I might upload an update video with all of the new entries. You may also notice as we go along that some of the entries are green. These are the ones that my wife picked out specifically, so they were added just for my wife who is not a zombies player. Secondly, you may also notice as we go along that some of the entries are yellow, specifically one per layer. These are what I consider the best or scariest of each layer in my opinion. Finally, a blanket trigger warning from here on out, as many of the topics we cover will be gory or just plain scary. And if you hate jump scares, sorry, but those will be included in the video as they come up. You've been warned. Now, without further explanation, let's get into the Halloween spirit and get into the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. These are things that aren't really unsettling or scary at all. In fact, it's the only part of the list that's going to be like this, but they were intended to be scary by the developers. It's stuff that might have ended up being funny instead of scary, or just a part of the map that isn't secret at all and might seem just kind of weird, but not much beyond that, or even just slightly annoying. They're things that make you go, whatever, and then move on.
Power levels critical. Shutting down teleporters.
Factory ambience. Factory ambience refers to the Riese background noises with the clacking of the machinery, random technology and electricity noises in the background, stuff that basically isn't zombies, that just exists in the map. Fire would also be included in this. It's stuff that really adds to the feeling of Riese, but I wouldn't really consider spooky, but definitely isn't normal. Brain in jar. This refers to, of course, in Riese and the Giant, the brains in the jars that you use to activate the Easter egg songs. They're, spooky aesthetic, but not much beyond something that you would see in like a haunted house. Like you'd look at it and be like, that's weird, but then you'd move on with your life. Like it doesn't really add anything. Angry George. This is referring to in Call of the Dead whenever you'd shoot George and he'd roar, get real angry, slam the ground, and then run at you. It's spooky that first time, sure, but honestly, it's not much after that. And even that first time, you kind of expect it. You expect it to happen. And so because of that, it's just kind of a game mechanic and not really scary. The Avogadro. This refers to, of course, the Avogadro. Both on Transit and Alpha Omega, but the list is really referring to just on Transit. The Avogadro, in theory, should be very scary, but it's just a very slow-moving electric boogaloo kind of creature, and I don't know, it doesn't do anything for me. It's just kind of annoying. That's it. Falling. This refers to in Die Rise, when you fall down, because the idea of falling down a 400 plus foot skyscraper, terrifying, don't get me wrong. But
what takes points away and why it's so high up is that, well, first of all, it's not secretive at all, but also it's kind of funny. Like after that first time, like it's pretty funny, especially flinging your friends off. Like I know, think about it in real life. Of course, that's terrifying, but still acknowledging the context of the game, it's kind of funny and not really scary. Maybe anxiety inducing as well in real life, the thought of falling, but not much beyond that. Last Gen Richtofen. This refers to the classified jump scare where it's just a PNG of Last Gen Richtofen zooming in, and it was intended to be scary, I think, but also funny. And, you know, it gets the point across. It's scary and funny, but because it's funny, it just kind of loses all the spook factor. And so it's just kind of whatever. Hence why it's up here. Spacesuit monkeys. This refers to the Ascension monkeys. They're just kind of a part of the map. They aren't really that scary, but think about primates falling from space and then, like, you know, running towards whatever the machine's perks. And the thought of that is a little odd and like a little alarming. More the spaceships falling from space, I will say. But again, the fact that they're tiny, cute little monkeys kind of removes all of that spook factor, because you're like, oh, look at the monkey with his tiny little coat and his little jacket, spacesuit. Oh, he looks so cute. And he slams the ground. And you're like, I hate you. You're annoying. But that's it. Bus depot for my wife. Bus depot for my wife was always very claustrophobic, and not just for her, but for her dad. Playing in the bus depot just gave a huge claustrophobic feel and a sense of doom because, you know, you only get guns, the box. There's nothing else to it, not a lot of area to train, and so it felt very claustrophobic. And although I don't find it scary, she thought it was a little unnerving, so we agreed to just put it at the top, because I think it's worth noting to put into this list, especially since it is quite claustrophobic. But as for scariness, it's kind of a footnote.
You are a soulless coward, devoid of reason and empathy.
Little man. This refers to our little man, the homunculus from 9, or actually just all of the Chaos maps. But if you don't know why I call him the little man, it's because of the little dance that he does when there's no zombies around. He just kind of shuffles back and forth, doing his little man dance. Oh, I love him so much. He's kind of grotesque in design. That's why he's on this list. So it might bother somebody, but in my opinion, he's just cool and funny. I love his little dance.
I also want a slice of the action!
Dragon heads. These refer to, of course, the Eisendrache dragon heads. I think they're just cool, honestly, but if you don't expect it for whatever reason to shoot out of the wall that first time, it can give you a little bit of a spook. But like I said, it's kind of off balanced by the cool factor of it. So, yeah. And similar to that, Cerberus heads. Very similar to the dragon heads, but the Cerberus heads on both Mob of the Dead and Blood of the Dead, they might give you that spook factor if you didn't know that they was going to do that initially. But honestly, it's just pretty cool. Glitchy trees for my wife. I actually forgot about this, but my wife remembered. In Dead of the Night, an unintentional feature, I'll put it, in Dead of the Night is the trees kind of glitch out when you look up at them. Funnily enough, if you're playing split screen, the bottom screen will show up in the trees. Really funny. But otherwise, it's just weird glitchiness that is very much unintended. For my wife, she finds it a little unsettling, kind of like breaking the fourth wall-y, kind of backroomsy, where it's like, oh, it's like reality is breaking. And granted, if I saw that in real life, yeah, I'm having an existential crisis. But why it's so high up, other than it being kind of funny to me, is that it's not intentional by the developer. It's a big part that I put in the description at the beginning of the preamble, is that it was intentional. This isn't an intentional part of the map, it's just a funny, unintentional glitch. So, thought worth mentioning, but putting it at the top. Layer 2. The tip. Anyways. These are the things that make you, well, uncomfortable when you experience for the first time.
or things that might have belonged in Tier 1, but just a bit more Easter eggy. Things are getting a bit more spookier, so I'll try to be more serious from here on out.
Zombies intro. This refers to the Nacht der Untoten Zombies intro. The first time that you see it, you more than likely completed the World at War campaign, watched your credits, and watched everything fade to black, expecting to go back to the main menu before your player is kidnapped into this intro sequence. Your player is laying in the middle of a foggy field, plane crashed, and off in the distance you see figures slowly approaching. As you close your eyes and reopen them, you notice them a bit closer. Once more, you close your eyes and reopen and see one breaking from the pack, running at you, full speed, arms flailing from side to side, and as he finally gets right up to you, everything fades to black. And the title screen, Nazi Zombies, comes to display. Really cool, really unforgettable, but that initial time that it happens definitely made me uncomfortable. It was unexpected. I was very confused, and then when I was finally thrown into the bunker, I was uncomfortable to find that I was in a completely new world, new game that I even put in.
Freeze. This refers to freezing for the first time in Call of the Dead. It definitely made me very uncomfortable to find out that I could not move. Seeing the ice slowly creeping into your vision was very, very unsettling, well, uncomfortable. And finding out that the only way that I could break out was knifing my way and struggling or wait for a zombie to slowly come up and smack me, and feeling that helplessness of doing nothing, it stuck with me. And it's definitely not a good thing to feel.
Jumping Jacks. Jumping Jacks are the boss enemy in Die Rise. They come at you in every 4 to 5 rounds, they kind of jump all over the wall and ceilings, and then they do some karate kicks to do damage at you. The Nova 6 crawlers are actually going to be lower down on the list, because although the Jumping Jacks have the same design, it's kind of hard to see them because of how much they move around. Plus, their weird karate moves is honestly just kind of funny. It doesn't scream scary to me because of how ridiculous their movements are, so they're placed a bit higher up.
We may now uncover the secrets of the facility's lower levels.
Test Tube Bunker. Test Tube Bunker refers to the opening bunker sequence in Zetsubo no Shima, where you see the bunkers down below, you see the Pack-a-Punch, the opening sequence, just basically a bunker overgrown with foliage. There's a very liminal feeling of it. It's not quite right because it's supposed to be a lab bunker that is heavily researched and populated and all this stuff, yet there's no one to be found, and nature has overtaken it. It's very liminal. I try not to use that word, but it is to me. Background Shadow Man. Background Shadow Man refers to an Ascension remastered. Outside of the map, you can see the Shadow Man. See, if it was just his silhouette there, it would just be an Easter egg, I wouldn't think much of it. But in between rounds, you can actually see him change locations. So he's essentially pacing back and forth in that room. And why I place this here is because the thought of him just pacing, sitting there, watching us. Why? What is he doing there? Why is he watching us?
I wonder if that rock brought those freak bags.
The original meteorite. The original meteorite refers to in Shino Numa, the original meteorite sitting outside the map with all of its gargantuan girth. It's just sitting there, pulsating in an orange or blue light in the remaster, and sparkling electricity across the swamp water. It raises a lot of questions and provides little to no answers. And that uncertainty is what really provides a lot of the horror.
Just seeing that meteorite makes me imagine what happened when it crashed, and more importantly, what is it still doing here? And the fact that the only interaction we get from it is when you shoot it and you get a single kind of related quote from your character tells me that no one really knows what it's there, other than Richtofen, but I meant player-wise. The meteorite's just chilling there, and for some reason, it unsettles me. Excavators. This, of course, refers to the moon excavators. Now, the excavators themselves are very slow, you get a lot of warning, and honestly, they aren't meant to be scary. But as they get slowly closer from the distance, it gives me a deep sense of megalophobia, or fear of large objects. Seeing this huge thing just slowly creeping its way towards you and then eventually digging into an entire tunnel and then opening a door and seeing the giant blades rotating in front of you, it definitely catches you off guard. And I know that it's such a small part of it and you get a lot of warning, but when the sirens eventually go off notifying you that it's digging into the tunnel, it scares me, especially in such a quiet map like Moon. The sirens suddenly going off and blaringly loud, it catches me off guard.
That's my power-up! Mine! Get that!
Bitch slap monkeys. The funniest named entry, I think, in this list, the bitch slap monkeys is for my wife, and it refers to the Shangri-la monkeys. I think they're cute. My wife thinks that the idea of a monkey running towards you at full speed and then smacking the shit out of you is kind of scary. And so for her, I included it. Mudroom zombies. This is for my wife. It refers to running through the mudroom, going off the path, and slowly trudging your way through the room. It's one of the few times in zombies where the zombie can actually move faster than you, and that's the part that upsets my wife. See, shuffling your way to just try and get to the water slide or even just the other side of the room and seeing a whole horde running faster than you towards you while you have to reload or something is very startling for her. I think it's just part of the game, so I didn't put it any lower, especially because it's not secretive at all. In fact, a lot of people probably run into it. But as a good note, I put it up here. Underwater zombies. Also for my wife, this is probably going to be lower down if my wife was making it because she does have thalassophobia, but since it is just a normal game mechanic, you fight zombies underwater, I felt bad putting it any lower, so I put it up here. But fighting zombies underwater, it's definitely not something to be okay with. Monkey bombs. Monkey bombs, if you just look at them, are disturbing. I mean, it has a high-pitched screech of a voice. You throw it into a horde, it seems almost excited to blow up. There's something about it that makes me uncomfortable.
For now you must focus on only gaining control of the tower above ground.
Leroy. Leroy, or Arthur, from Buried is big. Best way I could put it. He's big, and seeing a person be that big, just walking around, especially up close, is a little uncomfortable at first. He's not scary. In fact, he's very helpful. But at first, he can make you uncomfortable.
Damn it! Barely moving this mud.
Giant robots. Speaking of megalophobia, the giant robots instill me with the deepest fear of that. Seeing basically skyscrapers walking along, threatening to step on you, definitely makes me uncomfortable. The only reason why it's not lower, other than being a main mechanic of the map, is the fact that they are on predetermined paths. It's very easy to avoid them. They're not trying to kill you. They're simply just a function of the map. So although I don't like them, as in real life I wouldn't like them, they're not particularly scary. tigers. Don't get me wrong, I'm gonna clarify that. Tigers are terrifying, especially if they're trying to kill me. It's just, they're just a normal enemy. And of those normal enemies, it's kind of cute. Of course, it's like rotted in places, but like a tiger is still kind of cute, I'm not gonna lie. It's cuter than the grotesque design of hellhounds or plague hounds, for instance. Layer 3. The shallows. These are things that make you feel unsettled, even if slightly. Something feels off when you see these, especially for the first time, and you can't shake off the feeling that this isn't right. Super sprinters. This refers to Verruckt, however, a couple of other maps in the future have super sprinters, and the idea of them at full speed charging at you headfirst, usually with arms flailing behind them, is very animalistic. It's like an animal with rabies charging at you. It instills this sort of primal fear. And granted, it's not as scary as, say, a rabies-infested tiger charging at you, but it's definitely unsettling and something I very much didn't like as a kid when I experienced it the first time.
Need a mag like yesterday!
Pentagon Thief. Very similar. The Pentagon Thief is extremely fast. However, he is just an old man. But I will say him hobbling at first at a very slow speed to increasing at a very fast speed to get right up in your face does make it a bit scarier. Napalm zombies. Napalm zombies, of course, referring to Shangri-la napalm zombies. Though you might include the fire elementals or catalyst zombies from Black Ops 4, though I think the napalm zombies are a tad bit scarier in their design. The way they slowly hobble their way towards you and then self-destruct is unsettling enough. But the fact that when they're the last zombie or have been alive for too long, they start breaking into a sprint, desperate to blow up in front of you, makes them that bit more unsettling. Alarms and sirens. This refers to the Nuketown alarms and sirens whenever a perk or the pack-a-punch machine comes in. Seeing that giant mushroom cloud in the distance is an uncomfortable sign of things to come, but the alarms and sirens really just tops that all off. It breaks all of the mostly silence of Nuketown to fills your ears with a loud cacophony of noises that just disturbs your playing.
Get out of the way!
The Warden. The Warden itself is not very scary, honestly, in design, and you can't really see the zombie-ness of him that close. He just looks like he's wearing a riot police kind of attire. However, I will say, his summoning noise and the loud banging footsteps, especially him shaking your screen from how heavy his footsteps are, that is what truly makes the Warden unsettling.
We'll steal your heart!
Wrath and Fury. I think that they're more cool than anything else. The 9 boss fight, the 2 elephants. However, thinking about it in real life, if I had to fight a giant war elephant that was zombified, I would most definitely be unsettled. Possibly even scared. But, like I said, I think it's more cool than anything, so it's not quite scary to me.
Airborne!
The Secret. This refers to the toten secret. The actual secret itself isn't what's scary, it's the process by which you get to the secret, flinging you possibly thousands, if not hundreds, of feet to a faraway frozen island where you have to just swim your way through frozen water to get to the secret. I mean, I'd probably die. And it's definitely unsettling. However, seeing Mars at the end, very cool.
Your attack has caused the entity to...
The Megaton. The Megaton in just concept is very unsettling. Just this ripped radioactive being that shoots giant balls of radioactivity at you, and then when you kill it, splitting like an atom. It's very, very disturbing, and seeing that in real life especially. Bunny jump scare. Not particularly scary, although it is a secret and the scariest of the bunny Easter eggs in Cold War. I wanted to include this. This is the bunny Easter egg in Firebase Z. Staring at the bunny and it eventually shooting its head to look at you and then flying towards you might be a bit spooky at first, especially when you realize that you can't move during this transition. Manglers. I don't know about you, but seeing a 7-foot tall robotic cyborg dude shooting laser beams out of his arm is cool, but terrifying if it's shot at me. Hence why manglers are here. Projector room. The projector room itself is very isolating and again very liminal, so is the entirety of the theater. It's a place that's supposed to be full of people and it is completely empty of life. But what really makes it creepier to me and, bumping it up to the unsettling is the reels. Placing these reels, you get the only sense of human contact, these recordings, but more than that, you get these weird slideshows popping in and out on the big screen that people would usually watch movies. It's very dead in what should be a lifelike room. Crawlers. This is for my wife. This refers to normal crawlers, not the normal Nova 6 crawlers. Them with their legs blown off or just broken and then slowly hobbling their way towards you really disturbs my wife, and I can agree in a horror concept. I mean, it's definitely not just uncomfortable. It's something I very much would not enjoy. Spacesuit zombies. This refers to in Ascension, not the cosmonaut in Moon. This is also for my wife. Spacesuit zombies very much disturb my wife because it's the thought of being blown into the vacuum of space, and this shattered helmet that is found in the spacesuit zombies is what really does it for my wife. It's disturbing in a way that it provokes her imagination, not an upfront kind of horror, but more the thought of what could be and what has been. Bus zombies. This is whenever the zombies get into the bus. See, especially when the bus breaks down, stops, and you sit inside of it, seeing an entire horde crawling on the bus, breaking down boards, trying to get in, is definitely very unsettling, especially if you think that the bus is a safe haven, when a zombie inevitably jumps in from the front or to the top of the bus, breaking what you thought was a safe zone. The showers. This is for my wife. This refers to the showers in Mob of the Dead. Seeing a place of cleanliness being replaced by a completely dirty, filthy, blood-soaked room is a dichotomy that is horrifying for many. But add that the hanging bodies and most likely smell of cadavers just completely ruins the space and makes it a setting for like the Chainsaw Massacre. The Crazy Place. The Crazy Place is for my wife again, and it's because of the in-between nature of it. It's a place that shouldn't exist yet does. Sort of like the back rooms, the portal takes you to a place outside of life itself. And because of that, its existence itself is what brings this existential dread to my wife, and really emphasizes the thought of unsettling, but not scary. Takio Tree. This refers to the Zetsubo no Shima boss fight. The actual thought of being wrapped up in a plant and stuck in place is horrifying, don't get me wrong, but we'll get to that in the future. But this refers to the actual tree itself as an enemy. It's mostly stationary, so I don't find it that scary. However, the visage of it is very much unsettling. Gladiators. Gladiators themselves are pretty scary if they're trying to attack you, but the fact that they're zombified makes them added to this iceberg. And again, seeing them running towards you, if this was real life, especially the guy that throws an axe at you, no thank you.
Four-legged spirits?
Furies. Furies are the things in Revelations that crawl on all fours and then leap at you. The leaping is what makes them scary to me, because I don't actually think their design is really that scary. I mostly think that they're cool. But seeing them jump at you definitely brings them onto this list and bumps them up to unsettling. The Keepers. This refers to both the corrupted and the normal keepers. This is mostly for my wife, however I can agree with her that they are unsettling. It's the open maw of their face that does it for us. There's no visible eyes, just a gaping mouth, and this weird speaking in tongues-like language that they speak that makes them very mysterious and, well, fittingly, otherworldly. Layer 4. The Meridian. These are officially creepy things. Things you know for sure are not right and leave you feeling creeped out. You'd rather just leave the situation the first time you experience them, and one of these might have been the first thing to give you chills in zombies. The Dentist Chair. This refers to in Verruckt when you interact with the dentist chair, you hear a drill and screams. It may or may not actually be a dentist chair, but that's what I've always referred to it as. The Bookshelf. This refers to Numa's doctor's quarters bookshelf. When you interact with it, you hear Richthofen's screams of madness. And I don't know about you, but I definitely didn't expect it, and when I first did it, I actually just tried to activate the trap in the hut. So hearing that scream out instead definitely gave me a startle.
Low on gun juice.
Hellhounds. Iconic now, but the quote of "fetch me their souls" filling your ears and the air is dread-filling. Especially that first time. It's not something you expect, especially when the fog fills the entire map. And then finally, after a brief silence, a lightning bolt strikes and a giant wolf charges at you, on fire and full of rot. It's, ugh. The thought of seeing that in real life would have me running.
They're breaking my cochlea!
Shriekers. Shriekers they're like the super sprinters from Verruckt, but just a step further. The fact that they run up to you and they don't usually attack you, just scream in your face with a hurricane of wind is supernatural to the point of creepy. Again, having the supernatural power to summon winds and all it wants is to kill you is not okay. However, I will say its design, I think, doesn't really do much for me creep-wise. It's more what it does and how it gets you that scares me.
I am now entering the ante, suspended in thin air. I'm going to remove it now.
Brock and Gary. This refers to the Shangri-la time loop. See, time loops themselves, although an interesting concept, is quite horrifying when you're trapped in one like Brock and Gary. For essentially all of eternity, they're doomed to continuously find and die in Shangri-la. And the thought of never getting to leave that torment, whether successfully or through death, is worse fate than hell itself. Spider rounds. Giant spiders. Enough said.
Is this evil? You are a soulless coward.
The Pit. The Pit is a location in 9 that is full of blood and stacked on and on dead body parts. Nothing but gore and viscera to be found in this location, and I can only imagine the smell. It gives me the chills just thinking about being in that situation, and it is definitely quite a bit creepy. Warden's House. Similar level of creepiness as the Pit, but for a very different reason. Seeing a secret room at the top of this very neatly kept house is very odd, especially when you go in there and see this disheveled mess. and what should be a very clean, neatly kept house with a cozy fireplace is a dead body tied to a makeshift electric chair where the body pulled the lever himself. Ghost prison. Rather cool when you see it for the first time, but horrifying when you think about it. This refers to Blood of the Dead. During many Easter egg steps, you can see an entire legion of ghosts either cheering on or trying to fight other ghosts. Seeing this essentially living and breathing society of ghosts functioning around you, with you unable to do basically anything, is creepy. And it's like a haunted house, but actually scary. Player zombie jump scare. This refers to an alpha omega. Off in the distance you can see your player model twitching like a zombie, just standing there in the dunes, just waiting out there with the fire tornadoes. And when you zoom in to see what's going on, boom, a jump scare hits you right in the face. It's definitely unexpected. You expect to just see what's out there, potentially thinking it's a glitch of some kind, but you get jumped with the jump scare. It's not particularly notable jump scare. I don't even remember what it is of, but it's creative. I'll give it that. And honestly, the twitching player model, sort of like a zombie, I think is just kind of neat rather than scary.
What did that energy ball do to the poor assholes who were guarding it?
Apothecon Blood. This is one part lore and another part what it does to you. In Nacht der Toten and the Undercroft where Jug used to be, there's a floating red orb that glows and pulsates with a bunch of frozen bodies all around it. All of the frozen mess, disaster, destruction, that's because the Apothecon blood caused it. The fact that the blood alone of this creature can cause this much damage is horrifying. And the fact that you can interact with it and it will instantly down you regardless of your health just gives you a peek into the amount of power and horrifying nature it has, let alone the fact that it can talk to you. Blood that has consciousness. Shoutout the sewer. This is horrifying in the sense of a disgusting nature. It's almost body horror-esque, the idea of going through a sewer chute, unable to breathe at seemingly 40 miles an hour or more, just to be shot out at the end with all of the disgusting poop and other disgusting vile sewage water. It's disgusting. It's horrifying in a sense that not a lot of these entries have.
It is so cold, Mr. Monkey! Mr. Monkey just wanted to play!
Burned monkey. This refers to in Riese, you can throw a monkey bomb into the furnace. A bit more secretive, not a lot of people know it because of how old Riese is. But you can throw a monkey bomb into the furnace and hear it screams as it yells out at you, basically asking why. And beyond that, Samantha will scold you after the fact, saying that he just wanted to play, and yet you threw him into it. Almost as if the monster Samantha is accusing you of being a greater monster than her. The Apothecon Servant. It's been known by many names. Marastagua is one of them in Shadows. Astula Astoth is another in Revelations. I think there's 3 others in Shadows, but I don't remember them. But the Apothecon Servant is very, very creepy when you think about it. Ignore the really cool black hole nature of its gun and think about sticking your hand to a living creature as it wraps around you and it literally eating black holes to reload and shooting them out. Its tendrils just curling around everything. You're literally holding a live creature as it stares at you with its tens of eyes. Ugh, it's unsettling. Really cool prop though.
The storm exists only to consume hell pigs!
The Mega Keeper. This refers to the Eisendrache boss fight. Essentially, think of the Keeper from the previous layer. Think of the Keeper from the previous layer, but, you know, triggering my megalophobia. Really big Keeper, which is a whole tier creepier than a normal keeper. I almost said creeper. Aw, man. Cloning eggs. This refers to, in Zetsubo no Shima, you can create a life pod, basically. It gives you a second life. And the idea of coming back to life is a cool game mechanic. However, it's very much existential horror. You died. You are not alive anymore. No matter what happened to your body, you're dead. What came back is merely a clone of you. It merely has all of your memories, all of your bodily features. It is literally a perfect doppelganger, to the point of it even believing that it is you. And imagine if that egg hatched before you died. There would be two of you. And more than that, both of you would believe the other is the clone.
Are you fucking kidding me? Is this some kind of fucking sick joke?
The Shadow Man. The Shadow Man himself. I mean, design-wise, he's just a mass of tentacles, sort of like a keeper, but even more eldritch. And beyond just the physical design of him, I mean, the sheer desire of him to destroy everything, although cliche, is very creepy. To know that there's an entity out there who wants nothing more than the destruction of your world. It's a terrifying entity, especially with how powerful he is.
He said, leave him alone!
Knock knock. This refers to the classified knock Easter egg. Kind of funny, however very secretive, so it's this low. But Senator McNamara talks back to you every time you knock. The knocking itself is kind of trivial, it's not very creepy at all, and in fact the conversations are kind of interesting. However, after the fact, Samantha screaming at you and summoning and teleporting an entire horde of creepy crawlers coming at you is very much disturbing. Imagine trying to do a harmless prank on someone, and then in return, a demon from the ether yells at you and summons not endless, but near endless horde of these radioactive, gassed up creatures to come crawl at you and kill you. Layer 5. The Icy Depths. These are things that may take some thought to be, or are just plain upsetting. Similar to creepy, you may get the chills, or just not want to think about it for too long, but these are upsetting things in zombies. Asylum ambience. This refers to the ambience noises in Verruckt. It basically does what Doris tried, but much better. Hearing the ghosts of the asylum, children crying, women screaming, babies crying, it's very unsettling to the point of upsetting, because you have to think about what caused these people to stay behind. Why are they screaming even in death? The pig. This refers to in 5 and classified the pig, sitting on the table, being held up by a gurney. The pig itself is more disgusting. It's not even a zombie, just a normal pig. But think about being that pig. It has been there for so long, it is kind of green in color. And flies are picking at its skin and its eyes. And it's just sitting there squealing, begging to be let down, let free, and yet no one is coming. No one will help you. You can only sit there, begging to be put out of your misery, which is the correct thing to do. Nova Crawlers. Finally, we're here, the Nova 6 Creepy Crawlers. I mean, look at their face. I mean, it's basically the Keepers, but on a tiny, emaciated, quadriplegic body. I hate it. And especially when they die, they curl up, kind of like a spider, and then explode in a puff of noxious gas. Ugh, Very upsetting.
Years ago, I did research for a World War II movie. I came across some old Nazi documents.
Call of the Dead outro. One of the few instances where Zombies breaks the fourth wall very directly. George sits there in his chair and talks about Call of the Dead as the movie. And some of the things that he experienced on set, it feels very real, especially when it plays after you're done playing. It feels almost as if he's talking about the real life making of the map, which makes it even more upsetting because you have to think, especially if you're a kid, is he referring to the in-game lore or the actual map?
Yes! Faster!
The Shang minecart. The Shangri-la minecart may seem cool or even just kind of novel, but riding it and hearing the squeaky old tracks going, it scares me that it's somehow going to fly off of its tracks. That alone is enough to be upsetting, but the fact that you slow down as you go towards the waterfall and you hear children singing a lullaby and a ghostly apparition, it's... ugh. Moon ambience. Moon ambience, or honestly the lack thereof, is deeply upsetting. You can say all you want about Moon being too quiet, too empty, but that adds to the creepiness of it. Knowing that there is no background noise and the only thing you can really hear is your own life support is just isolating. The emptiness of space is further exemplified by this lack of volume. You truly are alone, and this lack of background volume really lets you know that. Silence screams on Moon. Cosmonauts. This refers to the Moon cosmonaut, and I don't know about you, but in regards to any boss zombie, I've never been jump scared more than by the cosmonaut. Something about his slow pacing walk and random spawn always catches me off guard when I'm running through a door just trying to get somewhere in the map, and him hugging you real close and then just, I think, headbutting you and teleporting you, making you not just scared, but disoriented, and it leaves you one hit to death, meaning you're literally on death's door, so if you're teleported to the wrong place, it's over. And he steals a part of you as he does it, adding to that horror of what is he doing, why is he here? And even in Black Ops 3, they add to this horror because when you stand near him, you can hear the radio's transmissions going in and out as if he's still alive. Yet, what is going on around him? Is it ghosts? Is it electronic frequencies? Very odd.
Armed only with makeshift weapons, Finn O'Leary, Sal DeLuca, and Billy Handsome lured the unsuspecting Arlington to the roof, where they intended to exact a bloody and violent revenge.
The prison loop. This refers to Mob of the Dead's story. Not only is a time loop horrifying like we addressed in Shangri-la, but so is the idea that you're constantly in a loop destined to betray your friends, or your friends betraying each other. And just to wake up and forget it all, or having the slightest inkling of knowing what's going on but not being able to remember, and before you can even ponder it, you're forced into another situation where you have to fight to save your life, and you're in that for the rest of your purgatory. Ghosts of the Manor. This refers to the buried ghosts, or the owner of the manor's ghosts. She comes and clones herself and slowly makes her way towards you, draining you of your life essence. Ghosts themselves are terrifying enough, but the thought of a ghost actually being able to harm you, that is terrifying. Hence why that they're a bit higher up, a bit lower down in the list than the normal Alcatraz ghosts.
Bravo! I am entertained.
Stokers. Stokers design-wise aren't much more unique than a napalm zombie crossed with a blight father, but less scary. However, what really makes them scary is just how fast they are, running at you, holding, I think, their club up high. Their design is very much upsetting. Mannequin jump scare. This refers to Alpha Omega. When you shoot all of the heads off of the mannequins and then go to Pack-a-Punch, there will be a mannequin there. When you look at them, the mannequin will look at you and a jump scare will be thrown your way. Definitely scary, however, it is kind of expected. You're doing an entire Easter egg to get this to happen, so although it is pretty scary, it's not unexpected, which loses a lot of points in the scare factor.
Crater, that looks just like the other anomaly.
The Dark Ether. The Dark Ether is a dimension outside of life itself, and isn't that a disturbing fact? Life always finds a way. That's the quote. And yet the Dark Ether disproves that by saying that there's an entire dimension of nothingness and death. That is all that awaits you in the Dark Ether. And the fact that you can get sucked into it, like the back rooms, I hate it. The eye jump scare. This refers to in Firebase Z when you have to get an officer's eyeball out of his socket. That enough is horrifying to be sure, but the fact that while you're doing it, he comes to life and tries to attack you further exemplifies this. I would definitely fall on my ass if this happened in real life. Cave spelunking for my wife. I definitely agree with her that the idea of cave spelunking is horrifying. But cave spelunking in Zetsubo no Shima to get a plant at the bottom and just barely making it out with enough air is terrifying. The claustrophobic corners of the cave that you could possibly get cut on, and the fact that you're nearly out of breath by the time you come up is, I hate it. I could not imagine going cave spelunking in the real life, let alone when getting chased by an endless horde. Parasites. I mean, flying bugs the size of children shooting acid at you. Of course that's upsetting. The Skull of Nansapwe. Just the existence of the skull is enough to be creepy. This otherworldly being has a skull sitting on an altar, but what further exemplifies it to the point of being upsetting is that you get ambushed by a whole swarm of these creatures when trying to grab it. And then when you do get it, it has the ability to completely obliterate life itself, just with the gaze of this skull's light. Plague hounds. Plague hounds are like creepy crawlers mixed with dogs, which isn't that a horrifying thought. However, I don't actually think design-wise it's a lot scarier than the creepy crawlers, hence why it's not lower on the list. But plague hounds definitely are very scary and is the much more creepy counterpart to hellhounds. The bottom view. We have officially reached scary. These are all things that definitely scared me when I experienced them for the first time. Maybe not a jump, but definitely something I would see in a horror movie. I know you're sleeping. In Shino Numa, when you activate the Easter egg song, the phone rings, you pick it up, and all you hear is a breathy voice say, "I know you're sleeping." Other than the existential horror that you might get from hearing that, knowing that someone picked up and that's the only thing they have to say to you before hanging up, terrifying. Samantha's room. This refers to specifically the red version, or after Samantha gains control, in Nacht der Toten. Seeing this room at a permanent tint of red, full of teddy bears, completely disheveled, a perfect dichotomy to what is normally Samantha's room, just a normal children's playroom. But what really exemplifies the horror is the giant teddy bear with a glowing red eye staring at you, menacingly. What is it doing there? Why is it there? It's one of a kind, and yet it does nothing. It just stares, watching. Samantha's scream. At the end of the Ascension Easter egg, when you think everything is clear, you've gained your reward, Gersh is free, a huge scream ripples the entire universe. Everything goes black and white, removing all color from existence. Although mostly a game mechanic to exemplify her screams, the thought of that happening is scary to say the least. The fog. The fog, and by extension the denizens that reside in there, it's scary. Although we clown on it now, having to traverse and getting lost in this endless fog filled with lava cracks in the ground and zombies, and on top of everything else, these alien creatures that latch onto your face trying to claw your eyes out. Very, very scary. The original jump scare. Imagine you just want to see a fireworks show off in the distance. You see a bright view of color in what is normally a dark and disturbing map. So you take out a scope, you zoom in, and boom. You get jumped in the face by some unknown green-tinted face that even I don't know to this day what it is. Some people speculate it's Russman, some people speculate it's Takio. I don't know. Regardless, it scared me the first time, and it can still get me to this day.
Keep your claws!
Panzer Soldats. This refers to the Panzers in Origins, but also der Eisendrache, and even the Krasny Soldats and Nacht der Toten, and honestly the rest of Cold War. It's because in design, they're basically the same. However, I will be discussing the Origins ones because I find them the scariest. Other than their hulking tank-like design that is very befitting for their name, them shooting fire at you, grabbing you with a giant claw is scary enough. But what really boosts them up to this level of scary inside this iceberg is the alarm that comes with them. Dead silence fills the air that is broken with a huge roaring siren before he shoots into the air and crashes before you, letting you know there is no escape from the Panzer Soldat. The Shadow Man jump scare. In Blood of the Dead, outside of the map, when you zoom in on a window, the Shadow Man himself jump scares you. A jump scare is normally scary, obviously, but seeing this tentacle monster coming at you definitely makes it a bit more scary.
Red blood, blue blood.
Nosferatus. Nosferatus, and honestly the vampires themselves in Dead of the Night, are plenty scary with their traditional bald, monster-like appearance. However, the Nosferatu that jumps onto you, trying to rip out your organs, that's what truly scares me.
I do believe the time has come to run and never stop.
Werewolves. Werewolves in the traditional sense aren't that scary. They're just humans that become wolves, and although wolves can be scary, I don't think scary enough to be this low in the iceberg. However, the werewolves in Dead of the Night, hulking 10+ foot frames of pure muscle and fur, slowly trudging their way towards you with a massive pool of health, definitely something I would not want in front of me. The Pablo jump scare. In Nacht der Toten, when you zoom in on the lighthouse, Pablo himself screams at you, running towards you. I hate it. There's just something very unexpected about it. You don't expect to see Pablo ever, and basically the only time you do is in a jump scare.
I already told you, stop meddling with my work.
The Abomination. It's like the Margwa, but not as scary, more dog-like. It's like a hellhound mixed with a Margwa, and isn't that a horrifying thought? Its shooting lightning is just the cherry on top of it being horrifying, because although it's hulking, you think, well, at least it's over there. That is, until it starts shooting lightning out of its 3 mouths. Biocrawlers. These are the crawlers in Alpha Omega. They have giant protrusions coming out of their body, and they trudge in a slow way, shooting gas not just at you, but at other zombies to empower them up. And the idea that their gas can power up creatures of damnation is terrifying enough, but their huge hulking frame adds to their disturbing nature. And since we're talking about them, I did not include the electric crawlers. I don't find them scary at all. I just find them annoying. If anything, they belong in Tier 1, but I don't even think they belong there. Getting blown up. The title of this may sound funny, but the actual contents of it is not at all. When you complete a game of Nuketown Zombies, you're met with a horrifying demonic laugh. And before you realize what is on your screen, you see it. The rocket slowly hurtling towards the town that you are currently on. And right at the end of it, when the laugh finally stops, all you hear is a whistle noise as the rocket crashes down and you fade to black before you can even hear the explosion, because you too are caught. Thrashers. Thrashers are basically on the same level of scariness as of Manglers, but they're a bit more scary for one reason. Other than them being completely made out of plant matter, them swallowing you up whole when you go down is what really scares me. It's as if they're digesting you alive. At least with the Manglers, they kill you first. But with the Thrashers, they swallow you up and wait to digest you. And that is scary and claustrophobic.
What have you done? They activated the parameter alarm. Self-destruct sequence activated. Disarm them. Immediately!
Bomb Step. This refers to the Gorod Krovi's Bomb Step of the Easter egg. Because imagine needing to defuse a bomb in 60 seconds in a completely new city that you have no idea how to navigate, and you're told by a giant robot, defuse the bomb or we all die.
Layer 7. The Last Light. From here on, we face things a bit more than normal scary. Whether it's because they're secretive and also scary, or just plain frightening, these entries leave you with a chill that lasts. Ordas. Ordas are the really tall eldritch abominations from Cold War zombies that, especially on closer inspection, you realize is a skyscraper that is an amalgamation of different body parts and dead bodies. It's definitely horrifying, especially the giant maw that shoots out flames and the undead equally. Peter McCain's fate in and of itself is horrifying enough, but this refers to his final fate that we first see in Shi no Numa. Destined to hang from the rafters, dying, waiting for help that will never come. More than that, playing with his body will inevitably lead to your screen going black and dying instantaneously. Extremely unexpected and very much frightening. You don't expect to play with a dead body and immediately get crushed to death. It's a very frightening experience to have happen, and very much a secret one. Zombie canisters. This refers to in Toten, there are these weird alien zombie creatures in the little canisters on the stage that have no mention in the lore. There's no answers for them, no radios, no little snippets, no ciphers or anything. They're just there, and their eyes are open. They just stare at you. Are they dead? Or more horrifyingly, are they alive?
Found the box today. Some Rebenka left his teddy bear in it. A disgusting and filthy toy. Who keeps bringing their child onto this base?
Samantha's influence. This is actually going to take a bit of a deep dive, but in Ascension, throughout the radios that you can find, you learn more about Samantha's influence. You learn about how the days go by in the facility, people find teddy bears appearing. They find Matryoshka dolls appearing. They see a chalk outline of a weapon somewhere. And just small things changing. And if you really think about it, imagine the insanity of that. You're seeing these small changes that you've never noticed before, and you ask around and everyone says, oh, it's such and such, but you ask more around and they don't know what they're talking about. There's little bits that are just changing the reality around you, and even your own mind is playing tricks on you. It's definitely disturbing, but in a very much long burn kind of way.
At last, the darkness is at an end. I live again!
Maxis drone. Imagine you're a researcher, and then suddenly you wake up, unable to really see, smell, feel, hear, and then all you hear is a motor powering up. And you're suddenly flying, yet you cannot feel or touch. You wake up as a brain in a jar, tied to a drone with cameras, and that is the rest of your existence for the foreseeable future. That is the fate that Max has faced in Origins. Thankfully, he got a body through Dr. Monty, but until that point, that was his existence. A brain in a jar. Skull jump scare. This refers to the jump scare in Origins. I'm not sure what the skull is. I think some people say it's Samantha, but I'm just going to call it skull jump scare, because that's what it is. Zooming into the tower, it's very much an unexpected one, and one that you could very easily run into without noticing. Just scoping into the church area, you could find yourself receiving a jump scare that definitely is much sneakier than a lot of the other ones. Zombie Richthofen jump scare. This is the Shadows of Evil jump scare, and is very much a high quality image, so not just the jump scare itself is what's scary, but the contents of the image. A zombified Richthofen cackling like his version during the giant cutscene, and it very much is jarring to see that coming at you, especially with the bright colors of the image contrasting with the very dull colors of the end of the waterfront district.
You freaks coming extra hard now?
Margwas. An iconic staple of the zombie series now, but imagine seeing the hulking bear-like frame of the Margwa, 3 heads, 6 tentacles flailing towards you, waiting to slam the ground and throw you off your feet. Definitely a hulking frame that I would not want to be at the other end of.
We may have found the source of our arachnid infestation.
Spider boss. Even more giant spider. Enough said. Blightfathers. Blightfathers is like the final boss version of a Nova 6 crawler. It's like a Margwa mixed with a Nova 6 crawler mixed with a giant spider boss. It's the worst things, and I hate it so much. The only reason why it's not lower is because it is a staple, not a secret whatsoever. It's merely horrifying. And so I put it at the same level as that spider boss. The Kraken. It's such a small little Easter egg in Voyage of Despair, but you can get a free Kraken wonder weapon by doing a side Easter egg quest, and at the end of it, a literal Kraken delivers the Kraken Easter egg weapon. A literal Kraken delivers the Kraken wonder weapon to you, which raises huge implications, the biggest of which being there is a literal Kraken in the water underneath the ship the entire time, just waiting. It doesn't do anything, thankfully, but it's there, and that's horrifying. Amalgamation. The amalgamation on Terminus is very, and I do mean very, similar to the Blightfather. It has a tongue grapple, it looks all burned and meshed together, and it has an absurd amount of health. Honestly, from a first glance test, I'd say that the Blightfather is more disturbing, but imagining all of those bodies warped and disfigured and thrown together to create this grotesque mass that has the capability of somehow running faster than most zombies, that definitely makes it scary. But throw in the fact that it can eat other zombies, that bumps it up to a level on par with the Blightfather. The Underworld Giant. Definitely triggering my megalophobia again, but seeing the giant in the ancient evil underworld just chilling behind the pack-a-punch, slowly bleeding out from even larger arrows, I hate it so much. And the fact that you shoot it to open a portal to Olympus is also horrifying. Because imagine it being alive. That scares me. The Margwa jump scare. This is in Nacht der Untoten when you look at the soup recipe, I believe, or shopping list, something like that, at the end of the ship in Nacht der Untoten. It's very much unexpected because it's a very much readable list. They expect you to look at it. And what's even more terrifying at it is you don't need a scope. I've gotten the jump scare just looking at it through the scope of a Strife or something else. And so it's one of the few jump scares that you aren't looking for it. You're just having a normal weapon, and yet it gets you. And the Margwa itself is very much horrifying, especially up close. Layer 8. The Depths. Whether it's despair, chills, or just plain fear, these next entries can be described simply as terrifying. New Knocking Door. Nacht der Untoten Remastered adds a new knocking Easter egg, a door that was previously not really anything, just background. However, in the remaster, there's a knock at the door. We don't know who's there, we don't know why they're knocking. All we know is, regardless of how long it takes, they will keep knocking until you knock back. There is something far more terrible than you. This refers to one of the quotes that Samantha says when you're completing the Moon Easter egg, specifically when you're filling the souls. Previous to this point, the greatest evil that we know in the zombie storyline is simply a little lost girl, unaware of what she's doing, harnessing powers far beyond her control and far beyond our belief. However, at the end of the day, she's still just a little lost girl. There's nothing to be scared of. Yet her admittance that where she is, the power that she holds, there is something far more terrible in control of it. That fills you with an existential dread that sticks with you. And until we learned more in Black Ops 3, it stuck with me throughout all of Black Ops 2.
You cannot prevent what is coming, Edward. The loop must be closed.
Samantha down dialogue. Whenever you're downed, you hear the true Samantha come out. This is during Origins. Samantha comes off as a little lost girl. She's just asking for help, she's trapped, she wants to go home. That's what she keeps repeating. And yet, when you go down, she gives you a personal dialogue. A dialogue that only your character can hear. And it's visceral. It's angry. It's frightening. It's monstrous. It's the old Samantha that we thought was gone long ago.
The Steel Warrior must be destroyed.
Zombies' blood dialogue. Very similar to the previous entry, the Zombies' blood dialogue fills me with a sudden jump. Because, like I said, she has this little girl voice that she uses, her quote-unquote normal voice. It lets your guard down. Yeah, I mean, she sounds like a legitimately little lost girl that you want to help. And yet in the Zombies' blood, occasionally she'll come with you with hints on how to free her, and not her normal voice, but the voice that she uses to communicate with the undead. Her zombified voice, her demonic voice, saying things like, "Step 1, secure the keys," in a deep demonic voice.
Well, you certainly can't stay here. You could send us somewhere else. Somewhere never been. I suppose I could make a little corner somewhere in history. A place where I can dump some of the other shit that I've left over. Or I just wipe you from existence.
The endless cycle. We've talked about plenty of cycles, but none are more horrifying than the overarching cycle that is revealed in Revelations, especially at the end. Knowing that despite your journey, despite your struggles, all of the battles that you've fought and won, all of it ends with you sent back to the past to do it all again. There is no fighting a god. There is no fighting the devil. There is simply fighting, and you will keep doing it because God tells you to. Beheading. At the end of the 9 Easter egg, our 4 characters of the Chaos Crew are beheaded, and you can see through the character's perspective, adding to the horror. And more than that, it gives credence to the belief that people stay alive for a little bit longer after the beheading when we see Diego's head being lifted and his eyes desperately looking around before he falls limp. Horrible, horrible experience. Terrifying to see, and even more terrifying to have to experience. Thankfully it's a hallucination, but a lifelike one. Frozen Eye boss fight. The Voyage of Despair boss fight terrifies me. The Eye is a boss that is just chilling inside of the iceberg, pun intended, the entirety of the Easter egg that you release at the end. The Eye is gargantuan, again, megalophobia, and imagining the creature it could have belonged to, it reminds me of the world-eating serpent, I believe Normangander. I'll add a note if I'm wrong with the name, but the world-eating serpent comes to mind when I see that giant eye. Painting jump scare. This is a very secretive one, not the most scary one, but because of how secret it is, I put it this low, because it is still a bit frightening. A very recent addition to our jump scare lineup, the Dead of the Night jump scare takes a lot of setup and a lot of staring at a painting to get. But when you do, it's not a normal PNG flying at you like a lot of the others. It is a fully animated body trying to get you through the painting, and that adds to the horror of it. Whereas the others may be passed as a hallucination, this is a very real entity trying to get you. The Dark Ether Monster. We know it now as an Orda, but back then we didn't. On D Machina, off in the distance in late rounds in the Dark Ether, you could see a horrifying, monstrous shadow lurking, stalking off in the distance. We didn't know it was an Orda then, and honestly, the lack of detail that we could see back then added to the horror. Not knowing exactly what it is, not knowing what the shapes are, but seeing its long arm dragging behind it, its horrifying hulking frame with no head, it definitely painted a horrifying picture.
I wanted to keep going. This me. Was Ice's heart. You won't even remember.
I was the nicest one. This refers to the end of the Blood of the Dead Easter egg, specifically what happens to Richthofen, the old Richthofen, the nicest one. What happens to him is tragic, don't get me wrong, but not the focus of this list. The focus is what he has to do. In order to end this horrifying loop that they found themselves in, Richthofen must climb into a machine willingly and drain all of his blood. Beyond just that, finding out that another version of yourself was simply waiting for you to do that, biding his time, and coming up to you, knowing that he can save you, and choosing not. After all of that waiting, you wait for death to come for you, and instead of death coming, the end of an entire universe dying, meaning that not only are you going to die, but no one will be there to remember you. You are erased from existence.
Target dropped.
The Mimic. Mimics and doppelgangers in general have always freaked me out, so I had to put it this low on the list. Just the idea that you're expecting something very nice, a new weapon, scrap, something like that, or anything like that. And yet what jumps at you is an abomination, an amalgamation of different human parts that vaguely form this weirdly grotesque shape with tendrils shooting out that somehow can form electricity. It's disturbing. In Cold War, it's not very disturbing in the fact of playing the game, but the mere concept of it is horrifying and it gives me shivers. It's completely unnatural and eldritch in its face, and is honestly the most eldritch looking thing in all of Cold War, even including the Abomination. I hate it, and I had to put it this low. Vermin. The Vermin as an enemy is not that dangerous. It's a little fast, but with the lowered health pool and damage output, it isn't that scary. However, put a lot of them together, now you have a horde of disgusting abominations of nature. That alone doesn't put them this low on the iceberg, but it definitely helps. A disgusting spider-like body composed of a humanish head and seemingly its ribcage to make the body paints a familiar yet equally disturbing picture. It reminds me of equal parts John Carpenter's The Thing and something like a skinwalker that has given up on its disguise. Throw all of this together with the fact that these things can just sometimes sprout out of a zombie and you kill them equals a terrifying nightmare of an enemy. They really cooked with Black Ops 6. Nova Tentacles. Similar to the Kraken from the previous tier, the Nova Tentacles on Black Ops 6 pose a constant, everlasting threat that remains at the bottom of the ocean. However, what takes them a step further from the Kraken on Voyage of Despair is that, despite being noticeably smaller than the Kraken, this monstrosity does want to kill you. Traversing the waters in Terminus, this tentacle will suddenly breach the waves and decide that you are no longer welcome in its waters. Thankfully, it does not grapple you, but it does send a cloud of noxious gas to slowly poison you to death. May God help you if you don't have a boat in its waters. Layer 9, the Frozen Hell. Our penultimate tier. These ones leave a lasting impression on you, either every time or nearly every time you play. These things scare or at least bother you in some way that you can't shake off. And if you ever saw them in real life, only one word would slip past your lips. Horrifying. Unlike the previous entries, whereas I may have described some of them as horrifying, these ones truly live up to the name horror.
We are the living, and we are the dead. We are the flesh.
The flesh. In Tranzit, you learn of a society that is breaking out across the world called the Flesh. Their motto, "We will not starve." Imagine living in a post-apocalyptic world lacking of food and most water, people fighting in and around themselves, fighting not just the undead, but each other. And the only way to survive is to eat the zombified corpses around you. That in and itself is a nightmare scenario, and yet, more than that, finding out that there are voices talking to you once you eat the flesh. Voices that others who haven't eaten can't hear. Voices that are conflicting with the electromagnetic ones, telling you that maybe there's some omnipotent force here, and yet, are there two? Why are they conflicting with one another? It's very frightening and is almost a milder version of the conflict between Monty and Shadow Man, but yet somehow more real because it's people behind it, causing it to be very horrifying. Because it isn't omnipotent beings, it's merely just as flawed human beings trying to manipulate you after already doing a horrifying thing such as cannibalism. The world-consuming monster. Similar to Jormungandr from the previous tier that I tried talking about, but named wrong, the world-consuming monster refers to in Shadows of Evil when you complete the Pack-a-Punch ritual. Not a lot of people stare at it for too long, but the skybox changes, revealing a horrifying monster coming to eat the entire world in one bite. Its magnificent maw is completely overshadowed somehow by the giant, overreaching tendrils threatening to grab the earth itself. It's disgustingly horrifying. Somehow you're able to vaporize it at the end of the Easter egg, but only just barely. And before that option even becomes available, despair would have already consumed me. Player hallucination. One of my favorite jump scares lives in Zetsubo no Shima due to being unique, secret, unforgettable, and more than that, scary. Staring at the test tubes in the lab while you have more than one player in your game, you can eventually find another player around a corner somewhere. Their gamer tag is present in everything. You think they're a real player, and yet when you approach them, they turn with a glowing mouth and eyes, screaming at you. Until finally, your hallucination ends, thankfully. And yet, it sticks with you.
Nikolai, Dempsey, Takeo, I'm only talking to you right now.
God is not omniscient. The Gorod Krovi conversations through the different wisps found in the map tell you a very chilling story, especially the one that is played after you complete the Easter egg, where God, or Dr. Monty, talks to our crew minus Richtofen, meaning that he knows what Richtofen is planning, but not what specifically, which is horrifying. Because think about this. This is an omniscient, omnipotent being, self-proclaimed. He knows and can be anywhere in the multiverse and can talk to you directly into your heads. You can tell because it's not through a speaker, it's merely ethereal. And yet, despite all of that, one human, he does not know what he will do.
Before my eyes, it is as though the universe...
Apothecons. Apothecons scare me the most of any creature. They are huge, hulking frames, fish yet also bug-like, swimming through the empty void, defying gravity itself. Their huge hulking mouths and giant glowing eyes staring into you as if you're completely insignificant and yet worth devouring. Revelations makes this even worse by being able to fly right past or sometimes through them. It gives me chills and makes me shudder every time going through a launch pad and getting way too close to it, thinking about what will I do if I land on it? What will I do if it notices me? And then going inside of it, it's terrifying.
Salvatore De Luca, Finn O'Leary, Billy Handsome, Al Arlington.
Salvatore, Finn, Billy, Al.
Pocket Dimension Trap. Blood of the Dead has a very significant lore in the fact that the Warden kills himself in order to create a pocket dimension designed to trap our four heroes, more specifically Richthofen, to get his blood. The thought of doing this alone is horrifying, but more than that, being the victims of this pocket dimension. They're trapped eternally in this loop on this prison, and some other casualties go along with them, the different mobsters. And the only way to escape is to literally doom yourself, doom your existence to escape. The pocket dimension is terrifying and the ultimate trap. Ray gun jump scare. This refers to Cold War's jump scare, the only one and honestly the most frightening jump scare, minus one exception we'll get into. Whenever you get the ray gun out of the box, there is a small chance that a red wisp-like skeleton will chase you, scream at you, throw some funny, fiery animation at you. I say funny, but more awkward funny. It definitely catches you off guard more than pretty much any other jump scare. It's terrifying, and really, it can appear anywhere at any time. The Forsaken. A lot of people clown on him, but imagine a 100-foot tall torso of a person made entirely of pure dark purple crystals, staring at you with a deep demonic voice, stating your insignificance and proving it by summoning hundreds, if not thousands, of the undead. With a name like the Forsaken, it's very appropriate. Layer 10. The Void. We've arrived. I'm sorry. Our final entries. These are ones that live with you not just when you're playing. You may think of these outside of the game when you think about the map, or maybe, just maybe, they creep into your head while you sleep at night. Locked in a case. In Nacht der Untoten, one of the most secret entries on this list, and one of the most horrifying, is that in one of the hallways near the dressing room, you can hear a very subtle, yet distant knocking. Or is it banging? It's definitely banging. Hard to find footage of this now, but I distinctly remember this banging going on, and as you go into NoClip and check it out, you see a singular case it's coming from. The banging gets louder as you get closer to this case before you realize there's a person in the case. A person that survived all of the hectic undead situations, the people evacuating, all of that, and no one came to save them. And all that remains until they eventually suffocate in this claustrophobic nightmare is bang repeatedly against the ceiling, the walls, the everything inside the case.
I'm so sorry. I really don't have time to explain. I have a universe to set right. Thank you, and goodbye.
Doomed Universe. More horrifying than the skybox in Shadows of Evil is the entire universe it takes place in. See, Richtofen appears at the end to take the summoning key, the only thing that saved your universe, at least you thought. He takes it away, letting you know that he has his own universe to save, and that, essentially, yours is merely a footnote. Yours is doomed to die. It is doomed to cease to exist at all. It was merely not meant to exist, a pocket dimension. You were never supposed to exist. God has no purpose for you. Spider breeding grounds. Bit of a trigger warning here. If thoughts of SA or torture very much trigger you, I would skip ahead to the next entry. In Zetsubo no Shima, through various notes, we find out that Tokyo 1.0 has been going through very much grotesque torture. Before turning into the tree that we know him at the end of the Easter egg, he was constantly played with by Division 9. See, the spiders didn't just come on their own. They arrived by experimentation with 115. But more than that, they wanted to make more bigger creatures. And so, taking an inspiration from a lot of the old Lovecraftian works, the story outlined the thought of, what if the spiders used Tokyo as a breeding ground? Every orifice of him was filled with these spiders, acting as a breeding ground and yet kept alive, until eventually they are able to birth a giant spider that became the giant boss that we know later on. That is the fate that Tokyo went through, by people that he trusted, by the emperor that he dedicated his life to. That is what he had to endure. The distant monster. One of the more subtle Easter eggs that are supposed to be terrifying and very much succeeds is the faraway monster in Zetsubo no Shima. On round 50, you can see its hulking frame, doing something that the Orda Easter egg attempted to replicate, yet was very unsuccessful. Seeing it up close ruins the illusion and seems nothing more than a cardboard cutout, yet from far away, it pushes entire, possibly 100-foot tall trees away with its sheer frame. You see the tendrils coming off of it as it moves across the landscape in the background. It's so large that it doesn't even care about your existence, nor the island's existence. It looks almost Cthulhu-esque. Is it Cthulhu with its tentacles? Is it an apothecon? My money's on an apothecon, but regardless, we don't know. There's only questions. We never get an answer. And that gives me nightmares.
What kind of war? A war unlike any you have ever seen. The Great.
Classified Easter egg. This is a bit of a joke entry, but I had to include it at the bottom. Classified Easter egg. It's getting to around 150. It's a nightmare. I had to put it in the nightmare void. Subtle mannequin jump scare. This is the scariest jump scare to me, and I made a YouTube short about this. The idea of Alpha Omega itself is scary enough, which I'll get into, but just looking at the mannequins makes me upset. I don't like mannequins. There's something about anything on the Uncanny Valley that does something for me that I don't like. Same with doppelgangers. I hate doppelgangers, and I hate Uncanny Valley. And though, I guess you could say doppelganger is in the Uncanny Valley, but the idea of the mannequins just existing fills me with dread. And yet, there is a small chance that when you look at one of them, just briefly, maybe even just a small glance for half a second, and then look away, they snap their head, even a full 180 degrees, to stare right back at you. And when you look at them right back after it happens, after you swear you saw their head move, they keep staring at you, refusing to look away, confirming, yes, I am looking at you.
What I've been told, as long as we're on site, they remain perfectly still. Don't move an inch.
The mannequins are alive. Touched upon also in the same short that I discussed earlier in the previous entry, the 80 AM units, or rather just the mannequins and Alpha Omega, are alive. They are real. They're not just figurines placed around the city to look like a real city. They take care of the city when people aren't around. They move, they interact, they live. And the thought of all of these live mannequins just waiting for us to leave, waiting for the opportunity to move around, to do something, is very, very scary, and only adds to the scariness of our previous entry. Patient 13. I now understand the feeling described in Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu. Patient 13 is the closest thing to a Cthulhu boss fight in zombies, possibly even in gaming. Its sheer size is overwhelming. Its mere existence is both intimidating and incomprehensible. Its size is so gargantuan that it stands easily 50 feet tall just out of the water, with tentacles going as far as hundreds of feet away from the main body. And all of this is not even acknowledging its overwhelming supernatural powers of summoning the undead, shooting gas and beams of energy, and even undergoing several states of metamorphosis to ever increase its powers. This being shouldn't exist. It can't exist, and yet it does. And we are tasked with somehow killing it. What a nightmare. The collapse of a multiverse. Our final entry is fittingly the end of our crew and the Aether storyline. Although it seemed disappointing at first, think about the horrifying aspect of the end of our story. Our, I believe, 10 years long quest, ending with the inevitability of knowing that your existence is causing the very evil that you fight. The only way to resolve everything, to have a normal life, is to never have one. You must end not just yourself, not just your friends and comrades, and your enemies, and everyone you've ever met, but the entire multiverse. Meaning you're not just ending yourself, but yourselves. Not just your friends, but all versions of them. All of them must disappear in order for any sort of life to ever exist. Welcome to shore. It's been a long journey through this iceberg, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was spooky enough for you. I hope to do more of these in the future, or at least videos like it, and honestly, I just hope that you enjoyed this one, if anything, or just part of it. Comment below what your favorite part of this is, and let me know if I missed anything. But before ending this, I wanted to do something a bit fun. See, as we went through all of the entries, you may have noticed that they each belong to a map. Some of them more than one, but generally the concept of the horror was introduced in one map specifically. Well, I gave each of these entries a point value, basically equivalent to what layer it is. So if it's in layer 1, it's worth 1 point, layer 2, 2 points, so on and so on. And I attributed those points to each of the main zombies maps. And, well, I ranked them. Now I want to say that this is in no way a list of what the scariest maps are. because a scary map is more dictated by the ambiance rather than what is in the map. However, this is more a ranking of, according to this iceberg, what has the scariest things in the map. And so, if you want to see the full list, it is in the description below. But here are our bottom 3. The worst and least scariest zombies map is Nacht der Toten, with 0 entries. You may have noticed that there is nothing from Mauer on this iceberg. You may argue that the Krasny Soldat is scary, but that's just a repeat of the Panzer, so I didn't include him. The boss fight is pretty spooky, but honestly I just think it's cool. I didn't really find it scary. There's not a whole lot about Mauer that I found scary. Next, at number 32 is Nacht der Untoten. I mean, it's simplistic, it's got a cool ambiance, but beyond the intro, there's not much to call scary. At 31 then is Die Rise. Again, falling, that's about it. On the flip side, however, we have our scariest entries that I want to highlight. At number 3, with 41 points, is Origins. From the jump scare to the giant robots to just the overall aesthetic of the map, there's definitely a lot to be scared of. It may be a bit more niche, but it's definitely full of a lot of spooky content. Number 2 is, unsurprisingly, Shadows of Evil, with 46 points. Between the world-eating monster and the eldritch abominations that are Margwas, there's plenty to be scared of on this map. Not even including all of the secrets that you can go find. And finally, our gold standard for spooky content, and in my opinion, just the scariest map in general, surprising to some people, but not to me, with a whopping 67 points, Zetsubo no Shima. Between the monster in the distance to the general crazy, creepy, arachnid-filled, haunted, zombified swamp island, to just all the little bits and pieces that can be found in Zetsubo. Zetsubo has consistently and constantly filled my mind when I think of what a spooky zombies experience is. But I hope you enjoyed. That's all from me. Please check out the description below, not just for that list that I said, but to see all of the credits. I made sure to include all of the footage that I got from other YouTubers that I just couldn't get myself due to a lack of time. I'd only gave myself about a little over 2 weeks to do this video, so there was a lot of footage I needed to get that I couldn't get myself. And if you like any of the spooky music, I gotta say, stop saying spooky now that the video's done. If you like any of the scary music, check the description below. All of it is listed there as well. But with that, I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of your time, and I will see you next time, whenever next time is. Happy Halloween.